Welcome. I'm Dellis Frank of the Southern California chapter of the WCA, and we're joined here today with artist and longtime WCA member Ruth Weisberg. Ruth Weisberg is a prolific multidisciplinary artist whose work traverses the genres of painting, drawing, and mural-size installation. She has an avid interest in Jewish heritage and feminist subject matter that oftentimes incorporates the female figure. Ruth is Professor of Fine Arts at the University of Southern California and is former Dean of the USC Roski's School of Design and Art. She has received several awards for her work, such as the Women's Caucus of Art Lifetime Achievement Award, a Printmaker Emeritus Award from the Southern Graphic Council International, and the Foundation for Jewish Culture's 50th Anniversary Cultural Achievement Award. Professor Weisberg has also received such honors as Doctor of Humane Letters from Hebrew Union College and the College Art Association Distinguished Teaching of Art Award. Professor Weisberg received her BFA and MFA degrees from the University of Michigan and a laurea from the Accademia delle Belle Arti of Perugia, Italy. Her work is held in the permanent collections of over 60 museums nationally and internationally. Ruth, I'm so excited to be here with you today. It's just thrilling me that I was asked to be a part of this. And you founded the Southern California chapter of WCA in 1975. Can you tell us a little bit about that time and what that meant for you?
Well, I come from a family of very activist women, both my maternal grandmother and my mother. So the idea of being proactive was not foreign at all, to the contrary. And so after being literally in the room in San Francisco when the WCA was founded, I was eager to establish a chapter in Southern California. And in 1975, I held a meeting at the Women's Building, which was newly founded by some wonderful, wonderful women, Arlene Raven, Judy Chicago, and I brought together a group of women, and people were very excited by the idea. They were already traveling along that path.
Now, in the book, The Power of Feminist Art, Judy Brodsky mentions that they wanted to expand their national exhibitions, and they were looking to you, she and Diane Burko, because you were, as they say, well established in the LA art community.
Well, it was a very exciting time. You know, we felt empowered, ambitious. There were all kinds of new ideas and a new activism, really. And we gave each other a lot of courage. There were wonderful examples. Judith and Diane, very prominent among them. But, you know, there were other women in Los Angeles especially. We had really started out in 1972 at a conference at Cal Arts. And that was really the beginning in Southern California. Not of the WCA, but of the women's movement in general.
We also know that you were president of the College Art Association in 1990. You were the first female artist that was the president of that time. Tell us a little bit about that. What were your objectives? What did you want to see happen? How did you want that to grow and benefit women?
Well, if you look at the history of the CAA, it's really dominated by white men. And some wonderful people, but, you know, very uniform and without any women until sometime in the, I think, early 80s. there were a couple women art historians who were president. Mm-hmm. And then I was on the board, and for the first time there were also African American members of the board. You know, there was a real attempt to diversify on the part of the CAA, and then I was elected president. And that was a landmark because they had not had a woman artist as president ever before in the, at that point, 80-year history.
The relationship between WCA and CAA at that time was pretty symbiotic, or what was going on there?
Yes, it was. There was a lot of interaction, and there was a lot of ambition in regard to the CAA to make it more open to women and women's ideas and leadership and activism. And of course, the WCA was a very major part of that.
We know that you're very involved with CAA still and with our chapter. Do you feel that WCA as a whole is adhering to their mission? Are they doing what they said they wanted to do? Are they setting out to continue to lift up, women artists and the feminist agenda and that sort of thing?
I think they've been terrific, and they've maintained their vision and their activism and reached out to younger women, which is always, a challenge. And, when you come from the generation that experienced a lot of discrimination, being active makes all kinds of sense. For younger women, it's a little more cloudy. Just, and I know this from my position at USC, teaching a lot of young women. Some of them have a good sense of the history of women artists, and some are totally naive. And so, I try to bring it into my coursework and my readings so that they'll understand how new some of these things are, how new and important.
Let's talk a little bit about what inspires you.
Well, I was blessed with really wonderfully sympathetic parents. As I mentioned, my mother and my grandmother were both very active politically for women. Mm-hmm. And my father was also terrific. And, in a generation where he was the first Jewish man to be accepted into certain things. So, discrimination was not a foreign territory to my dad either. And from a very early age, I was encouraged in terms of my art making. I went to the Art Institute of Chicago Saturday classes from the age of 6. And after the 4th class, came back and said to my parents, I've made up my mind, I'm going to be an artist. And bless their hearts, they didn't laugh. Oh, terrific, Ruthie's going to be an artist. That was settled. And then, when I was in college and decided that I needed to go to Italy to study, and they were just incredibly supportive. I was kind of living out my father's dream, frankly. And I not only had a year abroad, I had 3 years abroad. I have an Italian undergraduate degree, and then I've spent a lot of time in Italy and Israel and England since then as an artist, at Paris as well. I spent a year in Paris at Atelier 17 with Stanley William Hayter.
I know that you're interested in the artist's ability to travel through time.
Yes. Nicely put.
Yes. So how does memory play a role for you in that kind of art making? I know that the dealer, Jack Ruthberg, indicated that you've honed the ability to make art history converge with your own history. How do you make that happen?
Well, I am really submerged in art history. I mean, it's not some distant thing. I'm very, very attached to the history of art and interested and involved and always seeking new experiences in museums or in buildings. Architectural history also interests me a great deal. So I live it. You know, it's not something that I'm just visiting. I'm living it. And I don't feel distanced. I don't feel separated. I feel separated maybe sometimes from other things, but not from art history. I feel like I'm participating in it. It speaks to me, literally speaks to me. And I'm in dialogue with artists from the Renaissance and the Baroque period, the 19th century. Of course, I realized at a certain point that there weren't, and early on actually, I realized that there weren't a good representation of women artists. I mean, there's Sofinispa Anguissola, but she's really the exception. And, you know, there are other exceptions as well, but women really had to kind of sneak in the back door. They were either typically the wives or more often the daughters of an artist, because remember, art education, you had to go through an apprenticeship, and, you know, it wasn't like you could just enroll in a school. That wasn't how it works. You were in a workshop working with a master artist who was, you know, absolutely typically male. So women artists had to kind of
those
sneak
opportunities
in.
weren't, they weren't easy to come by.
They were not. And so it was mostly wives, sisters, and daughters who managed to become artists.
You know, in looking at the works around here in your studio, you see so much emotion and movement. Your series, the Kindertransport, looking at the faces of the children that participated in it. I mean, you feel like you're there with them. You're sitting by them. Their fear of the unknown, what's going to happen. Tell us a little bit about how you know, your emotion comes through in these works.
Well, I really hope to be a conduit for what happened, in this case, not so very long ago, 1938, 1939. World War II was looming, of course. They didn't know specifically what was coming, but there was a lot of fear, terrible, terrible, brutal anti-Semitism. And so families in Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia sent their children, 10,000 children in the end, by mostly rail, some ultimately by ship because they went across the English Channel. And they were given homes, mostly very sympathetic and welcoming homes in England. Not always, but mostly. And these children were separated from other siblings and their parents hoping that they were doing the right thing, not certain. I mean, nobody could see absolutely into the future, but of course the tragic truth of that was that they did absolutely the right thing, because most of these children, all of the children who went, the 10,000 children, survived, but the parents and the siblings did not, with some rare exceptions. You know, I have a tendency to find the small kernel of the positive. To do for instance, the concentration camps directly. I'm not saying I've never done it, but it's been very, very difficult. There's no hope. And I tend to choose moments that are more hopeful.
Talk about your process.
I try to immerse myself in these other periods, a lot of reading, a lot of looking at art, depending on the era. It's certainly in the era of the Kindertransport, there's a lot of photography as well. You know, just steep myself in the images from the period so that they become familiar and kind of second nature. I absorb them so that they become part of me, and I'm not painting or drawing things that are alien. I imagine myself in these different periods. I try to live the experience of these other people, even, you know, going back to the Renaissance. You know, living in Perugia and Firenze and other parts of Italy was very, very important. You know, it's not some distant reality. I spent a lot of time over the years in a tiny little town. It's not even a town, it's 7 houses.
Oh, gosh.
Called Gicolto. And there's nothing in the town that comes after the 14th century. So you're kind of living in the past. I mean, granted, there's refrigerators, whereas in the past you would not have had refrigerators. Right. But, you know, other than a few of those kinds of things, conveniences, indeed, you could imagine yourself in another century. And I have found that always to be a profound source of inspiration.
You can tell that was a very impactful time for you.
Yes. And not a time that stopped. I mean, I've continued living that. I haven't gone during the pandemic, but this is really the first period since I was 18 years old that I haven't been returning to Italy. Wow. So.
Do you always paint females?
Oh, no. I paint both men and women. But it is interesting in the Kindertransport series, there are boys as well as girls. Mm-hmm. But when I focused in on a particular child, it tended to be a girl. Mm-hmm. You know, I identify totally.
Yes, absolutely. What are you working on now?
Well, I just did a workshop with some very good friends up in north of Santa Barbara, and I'm still working on Kindertransport images.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So that's
not over.
Yeah, it seems like you want that to continue and grow. That's
yes.
very dear to your heart. I can feel that. Absolutely. Is there anything you want us to know about you that I have not covered?
I would like to say how important it is to me that the WCA flourishes and goes on and has younger members and keeps getting renewed. Because I think while certain things have changed, the art world is always a little problematic. Feminism is still extremely relevant, and other isms as well. You know, there's all kinds of discrimination in the world we live in. And it's just very important to have a network and friendships and a common cause and an outlet for one's activism. You know, we don't necessarily want to hand to our children the world we were given. We want it to try to improve it and make it better, a better world.
Agreed. Do you feel we're on the right track? Are we headed in direction that will help us get there to that vision that you see?
Yes, I think we are on the right track. but I'm probably somewhat affected by a wonderful set of friends, amazing students at USC, wonderful colleagues. I am fortunate in the world that I live in. Maybe if I was somewhere else, it wouldn't look quite as promising. But I have to say, I am an optimist and an activist. It's hard to be an activist if you don't have hope.